I would like to welcome you to the second episode of our Global Economy interview series, experts interview series with Professor Nader Habibi. We are pleased to present this Global Economy Expert Interview Series, which is an initiative by M&S Research Hub organization. It is dedicated to advanced policy-relevant dialogue on global economy developments and where economy and politics interact and intersect the crossroads together in order to have better understanding how the future would look like and improve the existing decision-making given the highlights that we present in these interview series. Overall, M&S Research Hub is a research and consulting organization headquartered in Germany. Its focus or thematic focus is on applied economic research, CGE modeling, and capacity building programs for organizations, governments, and individuals all around the world. Our work spans around CGE-based policy analysis, trade and energy economic modeling, hands-on training programs that support evidence-based decision-making and strengthen analytical capacity. In this special episode, we are happy to welcome Nader Habibi. He is a Henry J. Leir Professor of Practice in the Economics of the Middle East at Brandeis University in the United States. Professor Habibi is a leading expert on Middle East economics, sanctions, labor markets, and political economy. His publications, research record is amazing, astonishing, and signals his profound expertise in many fields where politics and economics interacts with development. He has decades of academic and policy experience across the United States, Europe, and the region. And surprisingly, he's also a very good composer and author. I mean, when I had a chance to review your personal blog, I have seen a lot of your composing notes and authored books, and this is amazing. I'm really happy to welcome you as Professor Nader.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to participate in your program.
Thank you very much. Overall, I mean, this 15-minute, during this 15 minutes conversation or interview or webinar, we would like to talk about what's happening in the region. I see that the tension between Iran, US, and Israel has reached a historical record. I mean, in my age, over my years of living, I haven't seen this by my own eyes, where over the last 2 years after the Gaza genocide, direct and clear Iranian attacks over Israel, and now the United States is alarming that it's going to attack Iran. I mean, all these kind of conversations and news and alarms, I haven't seen this before. So this is such a crossroad time for the entire region, which define how the future will look like. Throughout this interview, I would like to ask you a few questions, which will help us to understand better the situation in Iran and what are the future prospects and what are your personal opinion over what's happening and how the future will look like. Where are the twists in the existing situation, and how can we better read this whole scenarios that's going on. This interview is recorded and will be available on our website and our YouTube channel. And we invite everyone to interact with comments, questions, and subscribe for the upcoming episodes. So let's start, Professor. From your perspective, what are the key economic forces shaping the global economy today and shaping the regional economy, especially after what happened in Gaza and the conflicts in the region over the last 2 years? What do you think now? What is driving the economy in Iran and the entire Middle East region, MENA region?
Sure. So in the global economy, we see this increasing competition among major powers, China, Europe, and United States. At the same time that the United States, under President Trump, is reducing its commitment to the global order that the United States created after World War II, which was based on US military leadership in NATO and also sort of respect for low trade barriers, signing of trade cooperation among major powers, and we see that the United States is now withdrawing from that. That's one factor that is affecting everyone around the world because it's increasing uncertainty. The risk of doing business all around the world is increasing. It is no longer possible to predict the US policy in this environment. So that is a key factor that's having an impact in the region, in the Middle East region as well. At the same time that for certain commodities, we see intense competition, and we see that the United States is using its military might to influence the international order in a way that it was not willing to do that before. Coming into the Middle East region, I think the oil revenues of the region have been, one could say, at least adequate, but the prices have been high enough on average in the past 10 years to generate certain amount of minimum incomes for oil exporting countries. But geopolitical tension has affected the way that the region is able to best utilize these resources. Iran, for example, has been a target of economic sanctions for nearly 4 decades. But in the most immediate period, after having accepted an agreement with the Western nations, the JCPOA agreement, we witnessed that in 2017, the United States withdrew from that and intensified these economic sanctions on Iran. The economic sanctions that increased the economic pressure on people to the point that there were periodic uprisings, upheavals in Iran. So now, coming to 2026, Iran is facing two interconnected crises. One of them is that after a 12-day war with Israel, which did not result in a definite outcome, now we are seeing another buildup of military forces by the United States in cooperation with Israel and even United Kingdom towards possibly another military initiative against Iran. President Trump has demanded certain conditions from Iran that are very hard to accept. These include abandonment of the nuclear program, significant cutback in Iran's missile capacity, and total disengagement from the region in terms of support for certain groups that have cooperated with Iran, such as Hezbollah or the Shah al-Hashmi of Iraq. So that's one foreign policy crisis that Iran is facing. That has caused significant uncertainty, and economic conditions are very harsh. Along with that, we have seen a new uprising in Iran, which began last month. Unfortunately, it resulted in a very massive, large-scale killing in reaction by the ruling Islamic government. And now the society is in a state of shock. What has happened is that there is a total rupture between the group that supports the government and those who came to the streets in opposition. And it is very difficult to see how there could be reconciliation. There is this risk that we might see another uprising even in the coming weeks. And there is also risk that the current negotiations between Iran and the United States would fail, given those demands that Iran is unable to accept, and the region might go towards a conflict. Now, in parallel to these, in terms of new arrangements in the region, after October 7, 2007, and the massive killings in Gaza, we see that certain Arab countries and Turkey are coming together to create a new military alliance. This includes Saudi Arabia and Turkey in cooperation with Pakistan. So this is a new, apparently, cooperation with military dimension that might arise in the region. So a lot of uncertainties. On one hand, Iran's neighbors, including all Arab countries and Turkey, are asking United States not to initiate military action against Iran. On the other hand, Israel and United States, because of some domestic policies and some geopolitical priorities in the region, are threatening and moving towards a possible military action. All of these forces are going to shape the direction of Middle East for many countries as we move forward.
Okay, I see. So from your reading, I mean, in what the recent riots and the recent protests in Iran, you have mentioned this in your answer. This might lead to a change in the regime in Iran. And so I have recently read a policy brief by Mohammad Reza Farzangan that he is arguing that the protests in Iran are driven less by demands for a regime change, but more by the economic pressure stemming from sanctions. So the Western media and the Western newspaper highlights the idea that the Iranians would like a regime change because this aligns with the existing United States and Israel, military alarms. That this usually the case. They legalize their military intervention that they stand in the favor of people. So this is the narration in the Western media. But Professor Farzanigan sees this from a different side, that this is driven by mainly the economic pressure from the 4-decade sanction. So how do you, which scenario, or which explanation do you really favor in explaining the riots that happened recently in Iran? Was it driven
Yes.
by policy regime change or driven mainly by economic pressures?
Well, the pressure of sanctions clearly put enormous economic stress on Iranian households, on typical Iranians. My own research, joint research with Professor Farzangan, showed that many people, their income and wealth position diminished and brought them down from, let's say, middle class to lower middle class and even into poverty. This is what we both showed. So there is no doubt that the economic sanctions and the economic pressure caused this discontent and triggered the initial uprising. In the few days before the uprising, in late December, we saw that the devaluation of Iranian currency was accelerating. The decline in value was so rapid in those days that even the Bazaris, who are conservative, many of them, you can't say they are in poverty, but they couldn't do business because they would sell a product in the morning, and then when they go to ask the supplier to replace it, to order it again, the price that they have to pay might be more than the price that they sold it for in the morning. So they initiated the uprising. But soon the protests took a political dimension. And the reason for it, from the perspective of many Iranians, is that they feel like these sanctions are destroying their lives, but they believe that it is the unilateral policies of the Islamic regime that has provoked this enormous economic pressure. So they all say, um, look at the Arab countries, look at Turkey, they all uh, pursue support for Palestinians in a conservative way that does not provoke backlash from United States. But Iran has been unilaterally taking more action, being far more aggressive in trying to support the Palestinians and disrupting US interests in such a way that our country has become a target of sabotage by Israel, massive economic pressures by United States, and we, the average Iranians, are paying the price for that. After the 12-day war, there were negotiations, but they didn't go anywhere. So Iranians felt that there was no hope for change, that this situation is going to continue. The pressure on Iran would be continuous and massive for years to come. So their interpretation is that the only way we can end the sanctions so that we can end the pain is by pressuring the regime or even calling for a regime change, because we don't think the regime, the current Islamic regime, has the capacity to change. Ayatollah Khomeini is fully committed to this foreign policy. It is going to provoke more and more pressure on the economy, and we are going to be crushed and destroyed as ordinary people. So you see how the hope for removing the sanctions has transformed into saying the only solution is a massive political change that can change the direction of foreign policy, because as long as foreign policy continues, the sanctions are either going to continue or get worse. In that sense, these political protests, which we saw direct chants against Ayatollah Khamenei, the chanting of the name of the son of former Shah, Reza Pahlavi, they are all reflections of this hopelessness that we are not going to end these sanctions without a massive political change. So Professor Farzangan is right, correct, that these are motivated by sanctions, but the people have come to conclude, I would say majority of people, that there is no way to end the sanctions without political change.
I see this, but I mean, my reading for what's happening is that these sanctions will not be removed until Iran stop its nuclear and missile program. So even I don't know if my perspective is right or not. So even if the regime have changed in Iran and a new, autocratic and not a strictly Islamic government have been elected, but they continue in the same way of making Iran a military power, a nuclear military power, and continue with the missile program that exists now, then I believe the sanctions will remain and nothing will change. So the idea of the United States and the Western is to de-weaponize the Iranian military and make it, a fraction similar to other Arab countries in the region. So this is my perspective. What do you think about this?
The outcome of any uprising is uncertain. Nobody knows how it might end up, whether it could lead to fragmentation and what kind of political regime will take the place of this one. But what I think Iranians want, based on their behavior, the large number of people who came to the streets, is that I think they are ready to accept major changes in Iran's foreign policy so that the hostility with United States declines and the sanctions are lifted. So from people's point of view, that's why they call for regime change, because they think a regime change can bring about a significant change in Iran's foreign policy. But what will really actually happen We don't know what the outcome would be in reality, but this is the logic and motivation for people who uh, are politically demanding a change. And I think something else has to be taken into account. Now there is even acknowledgement by the Islamic government that thousands of people were killed. Some elements in the government, even President Pezeshkian, are saying that the use of force was excessive. We should not have approached it this way. We have killed our own brothers and sisters. Uh, this, the trauma of what happened itself, I think, is going to affect the psychology of millions of people. I wouldn't say majority, but at least a significant number of people in Iran would be so resentful of what happened that the demand for political change would even increase more. What can happen in Iran? Obviously, the government of Islamic government is strong, even though the supporters might be a minority. It is strong enough to defend itself against uprisings. But a combination of military attack from outside, if combined with uprisings, might lead to a different outcome. And then we see some evidence of disagreement and debate within the ruling elite inside the Islamic uh, ruling government, ruling Islamic regime, which might result in some kind of change from within. We don't know that. We have had challengers from within. For example, former Prime Minister Mousavi, who has been under house arrest. He was popular and he won the election several years back in 2008, but has been under house arrest ever since. So it shows that you have some opposition within the ruling regime which might also be able to play a role moving forward.
I got your point. Do you see a link between the recent Epstein scandal and the file disclosures over the last weeks and the current tension between Iran, Israel, and the United States? Does, for example, the Iranian security services or might be involved in such disclosure in a way that to, grasp attention or make the United States public opinion a bit busy about these disclosures and what happens after this away from the Iranian scenario and the existing military alarms? Do you see any link between the timing of the file disclosures and the existing conflict?
Are you asking whether the Trump administration is trying to distract attention from the Epstein file by focusing on Iran and escalation with Iran?
This or the
Is that
other way around.
what you
Iran is
are?
involved in this in a way to distract the Trump administration away from the Iranian case
Um,
in order to alleviate pressure and military pressure and so on. Do you see any link?
well, it's very difficult to assess motivation
Mhm.
for why Trump administration behaves the way it does. Clearly, these two uh, developments are moving in parallel, and the Epstein
Mhm.
files are attracting more media attention, even it is escalating in the United States. But I don't know because it's easy to speculate, but you have to discuss events based on evidence. Um, the pressure on Iran and waiting for hope by the US administration to change Iran's foreign policy. This is older than just the Epstein file. It has continued ever since the 12-day war. So we see that pressure continuing, which finally resulted in a number of negotiations. Um, I think one could say that the concern of Israel and the fact that obviously Israel has influence on US foreign policy, and also the conservative faction of the Republican Party in the United States are both factors that drive or influenced President Trump's foreign policy towards Iran. I would not be able to speculate on the interaction with the Epstein file.
Yes, yes, I can see. One final question,
Yes,
Professor Nader. I don't hope this will happen, but if the tension between Israel and Iran were to persist or escalate, what kind
yes.
of spillover effects might be expected for the region, for Iran itself, for Europe, for the global economy in broad? How could such tension in between Iran and Israel can influence the global economy? What kind of transmission channels might drive such effects that you might think about?
Well, first of all, it adds a risk premium to price of oil and also to investment in the region. One of the reasons that many Arab countries, especially countries like Saudi Arabia, would like to see an end to these tensions is because they are interested very much in investment, in stability. So this risk factor might play a role there. It all depends on how you present these various scenarios of tension between Israel and Iran. If we have another war, which would be very, I think, intense in terms of aerial war, Iran has demonstrated that it has advanced weapons, and also obviously United States and Israel have a very, very powerful air force combined together. So it would be intense, especially the first few days. We might see clearly some potential for damage or attack on U.S. air bases by Iran if they can. Iran has claimed that it might close the Hormuz, but I don't know if they would actually carry out that. It all depends on how things develop. Um, the possibility of this war resulting in instability inside Iran is a factor that might affect the situation. It might even cause some instability in Iraq, given the division of various factions in that country. And also, if there is a scenario where you have a regime collapse replaced by a different regime, then we might see a new direction in Iran's foreign policy, which again would have implications. It might lead to more stability because if that regime is moderate, it can play a foreign policy similar to Turkey and Saudi Arabia in a new arrangement, perhaps, because that seems to be popular, but we really don't know. The war itself is one factor to consider. The impact of war, how it ends, is another factor. It's hard to predict how all of these will play out, but clearly there would be some implications, at least in the short run.
Yes, yes, yes. One final, I would say, I would call it personal question before we
Yes,
conclude this interview. While exploring your research work, Professor Nader, I have seen that you have started a project that you call it
yes,
Arab Turks and Iranian projects back
correct.
in 2016. I
Yes.
had a chance to review some details about the project, but I would like to ask you, after this years, nearly 10 years so far, how do you evaluate its success in fostering mutual understanding among these neighboring communities? Have you observed any, positive impact, any collaboration regarding this project? Have you seen any, real impact on the ground for this project?
Yes. Well, what I have observed is that it seems that whenever there is tension, there is a tendency by actors, meaning Turkey, for example, with Saudi Arabia, or Saudi Arabia with Iran, there is a tendency to try to reduce the tension. And this, I think, is a good development. There is more communication among the states. Um, uh, and we see, for example, this cooperation among Turkey and Saudi Arabia because they realized that the new geopolitics and new balance of power requires both economic cooperation and security cooperation. I'm hopeful that we might see more maturity in the way that you have seen in East Asia over time, uh, uh, steps taken to reduce tensions, to rise above historical grievances. And fortunately, what my research has been accepted for a book publication. I have signed the contract, and I'm now putting together these materials in a book. Of course,
Great.
my concern is not just with the state-to-state cooperation, but people-to-people NGOs developing an understanding of the fact that historically there was a period that we were all accepting each other as equal rivals. Obviously, there was competition, tension, but we treated each other in the same way that Europeans treated each other as equals at the very top of the global order. Uh, they would cooperate, they would exchange artistic values, they would learn about each other's literature. My hope is that we open our eyes and look at our neighbors instead of continuously looking at the West and ignoring our neighbors, and which is what, unfortunately, the pro-Western elite, in my opinion, have done ever since World War II. We know more about literature and art of everyone else other than ourselves. But uh, I'm optimistic, and I'm going to really try to promote this idea as much as I can. Hopefully, with this book that's coming up, I hope it would have a positive impact.
I hope so. I'm also very optimistic. Thank you very much, Professor Nader, for your time and your
Thank you.
insights. It was very, really helpful. And looking forward to meet with you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I hope that your Research Hub initiative, MS Research Hub, would be successful and we would see more wonderful outputs being made available on your website.
Hopefully. Thank you. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Professor Nader. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.